The story of KGB's Kiss of Death, gun that assassinated with one disguised shot. West Berlin, 1965. A routine checkpoint on the border between freedom and the Iron Curtain. Guards examine documents, search luggage, check for contraband. Just another day in the divided city where every crossing could conceal an agent. Every traveler might be carrying secrets. Then someone finds something unusual. A tube of lipstick in a woman's purse. Unremarkable. Standard. The kind of cosmetic item that passes through 1,000 checkpoints every day without a second glance. But something about this one catches their attention. The weight is wrong, the balance is off, and when they open it, they discover they're not holding makeup, they're holding a weapon. A single shot, 4.5mm pistol, perfectly disguised as an ordinary cosmetic, small enough to slip past any inspection, deadly enough to kill at close range, and sophisticated enough to have passed through countless border crossings without detection. The Americans have just discovered what the KGB calls the kiss of death. This is the story of how lipstick became lethal, how beauty products became weapons, and how the Cold War turned everyday objects into instruments of assassination. The philosophy of hidden death. To understand the lipstick pistol, you first need to understand the minds that created it. The 1950s and 60s were the golden age of concealed weapons, not just hidden, but transformed, disguised so completely that they became invisible in plain sight. The KGB faced a fundamental problem. Their agents operated behind enemy lines, deep in Western territory, where discovery meant capture, interrogation, or death. They couldn't walk around carrying obvious weapons. Security services in Berlin, Frankfurt, London, Washington were constantly searching for guns, explosives, traditional instruments of violence. So Soviet engineers asked a different question. What if the weapon didn't look like a weapon at all? What if it looked like something so ordinary, so innocent, so utterly mundane, that no security guard would ever give it a second thought? The answer was brilliant in its simplicity. Make weapons that weren't just concealed, but camouflaged as objects people carried every single day. Objects so common they were essentially invisible. Objects that aroused no suspicion whatsoever. Cigarette cases, fountain pens, tobacco pipes, flashlights, and yes, lipstick. The beauty of the lipstick pistol wasn't just that it was small. Miniaturization alone wasn't revolutionary. The genius was that it transformed a weapon into something women were expected to carry. Something that security guards would see 100 times a day without thinking twice. Something that made perfect sense in a woman's purse, on her person, anywhere she went. In the paranoid world of Cold War espionage, the most dangerous weapon wasn't the biggest or the most powerful. It was the one nobody saw coming. The discovery, the lipstick pistol discovered at the American checkpoint in West Berlin in 1965, was not the first concealed KGB weapon the West had encountered, but it may have been the most elegant, the most audacious, the most perfectly designed for its lethal purpose. The device was deceptively simple, a hollow tube, roughly the size and shape of a standard lipstick container. Inside that tube, a 4.5mm barrel. A single round. No magazine, no reloading mechanism. This was a one-shot weapon, designed for a single, decisive action. The firing mechanism was equally straightforward. Twist the bottom of the tube, and a small hammer strikes the primer of the round. The bullet fires. At close range, pressed against the target's body, it could deliver a fatal wound. And in an instant, the weapon could be discarded, destroyed, or simply dropped into a purse, appearing to be nothing more than an ordinary cosmetic that had accidentally broken. The barrel opening could be concealed with a wedge of actual lipstick, adding another layer of deception. A security guard could open the case, see what appeared to be lipstick, and wave the woman through. The weapon was virtually undetectable unless someone knew exactly what to look for. Intelligence analysts examining the device were struck by its sophistication. This wasn't crude improvisation, this was precision engineering. Someone had thought deeply about every element of the design. The weight had to match a real lipstick tube. The external appearance had to be perfect. The mechanism had to be reliable enough to fire when needed, but safe enough that it wouldn't discharge accidentally in someone's purse. Female KGB operatives could carry this weapon across borders, through security checkpoints, into embassies and government buildings without arousing the slightest suspicion. It gave them a lethal capability in situations where a conventional weapon would have been impossible to conceal. The weapon earned its nickname immediately: the kiss of death, a perfect description for a device that turned feminine allure into deadly force. A weapon that could be produced in a seemingly intimate moment, pressed against the target, and fired before they even realized what was happening. One shot, one chance, one victim who would never see it coming. The defector's revelation. The lipstick pistol wasn't discovered in isolation. By 1965, Western intelligence had already learned that the KGB was developing an entire arsenal of disguised weapons. They knew this because, 11 years earlier, a Soviet agent had changed sides and revealed the secrets. His name was Nikolai Khokhlov, and in February 1954, he made a decision that would expose the KGB's assassination program to the world. Khokhlov was no ordinary agent. During World War II, he had fought behind German lines, conducting partisan operations, earning decorations as a war hero. After the war, he joined the Ministry of State Security, later reorganized as the KGB, specializing in eliminations of defectors and émigré leaders who opposed the Soviet regime. In early 1954, Khokhlov received orders. He was to travel to Frankfurt, West Germany, and oversee the assassination of Georgy Okholovich, chairman of an anti-communist organization called the National Alliance of Russian Solidarists. 2 other agents were already in place. Weapons had been smuggled into the country. The operation was planned down to the smallest detail, but Khokhlov had developed doubts. He had a wife who told him plainly that if he carried out this murder, she could not remain married to a murderer. He had begun questioning whether killing fellow Russians who simply opposed Soviet rule was justified. And when he arrived in Frankfurt, he made a choice that would change his life forever. On February 12, 1954, Khokhlov went to Okholevich's apartment. He knocked on the door. When Okholovich answered, Khokhlov said 5 words that must have frozen the blood in the man's veins. "I have come from Moscow." Then he revealed the entire plot. He told Okholovich that he was supposed to die. He explained the assassination plan in detail, and he announced his decision to defect to the West rather than become a murderer. 6 days later, Khokhlov presented himself to the United States Consulate General, seeking political asylum, and he brought with him a treasure trove of intelligence that would shock the world. The arsenal revealed on April 23, 1954, reporters packed into a press conference in Bonn, Germany. What they saw would make headlines around the world. Khokhlov, a slight, scholarly-looking man in glasses and a dark blue suit, calmly displayed the weapons he had been issued for the assassination. And what weapons they were. 2 cigarette cases, leather-covered, king-sized, completely ordinary in appearance. Except they weren't cigarette cases at all. They were 4-shot, 6.25mm silent weapons, powered by batteries, designed to fire cyanide-tipped bullets with a sound no louder than the snap of fingers. Inside each case, under 19 fake cigarette tips, was a deadly firing mechanism. A concealed button on the side would discharge the weapon. The bullets themselves were hollow points filled with a mixture of 2/3 potassium cyanide and 1/3 gum binder sealed into the hollow point. A hit anywhere on the body would be fatal. The cyanide would kill within minutes. The technical sophistication was remarkable. The weapons used an electric ignition system powered by flashlight batteries and employed captive piston ammunition, making them nearly silent. The expanding gases from the gunpowder were captured behind a piston that drove the bullet forward while simultaneously sealing the cartridge shut. In most environments, the discharge would be virtually undetectable. Khokhlov also presented 2 triple-barreled electric pistols, similarly disguised, similarly silent, similarly lethal. American intelligence officers examining the weapons were stunned. This wasn't just clever engineering. This represented a vast amount of planning and research in weapon miniaturization and design. The weapons were intended for a close-range assassination. Khokhlov would have approached Okholovich, perhaps offered him a cigarette, pressed the button, and walked away. The target would collapse within minutes from cyanide poisoning, and Khokhlov would have disappeared into the crowd, carrying what appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary cigarette case. The revelation caused an international scandal. Here was concrete proof that the Soviet Union was actively conducting assassination operations against political opponents in Western countries. The weapons themselves were evidence of a sophisticated, well-funded program to develop the tools of covert murder. And they were just the beginning, the mind behind the weapons. The KGB's concealed weapons program operated in complete secrecy. The engineers who designed these devices worked in classified laboratories, their names unknown, their work unacknowledged. They were solving problems that conventional weapons designers never considered. How do you create a weapon that can pass through security checkpoints? You make it look like something people carry every day. How do you ensure it functions reliably despite its tiny size? You simplify the mechanism to its absolute minimum. How do you make it deadly despite its limitations? You use poison. The lipstick pistol embodied all of these principles. It was small enough to fit in a purse, simple enough to be reliable, lethal enough to accomplish its mission, and disguised well enough to be invisible. But there was something else, something darker in its design. The lipstick pistol was specifically created for female agents. This wasn't a universal tool. This was a weapon designed around gendered assumptions. Men carried cigarettes, pipes, pens. Women carried lipstick. And in the 1950s and 60s, security services rarely subjected women to the same level of scrutiny as men. A male agent with a briefcase might face intensive searching. A female agent with a purse, especially if she was young and attractive, might receive only a cursory glance. The lipstick pistol exploited this bias ruthlessly. It turned feminine appearance into an operational advantage, beauty into a weapon, and the target's own assumptions into a fatal vulnerability. The KGB trained female operatives specifically in the use of these concealed weapons. The scenarios they prepared for were chillingly intimate. Get close to the target, perhaps in a social setting, at a party, during a chance encounter that seemed perfectly innocent. Produce the lipstick as if to apply makeup. Then, in a moment when physical contact seemed natural, press it against the target and twist the base. One shot, close range, almost silent. The target might feel a sharp pain, like a bee sting. By the time they realized something was wrong, the agent would be gone, and within minutes, the victim would collapse, apparently from natural causes, or perhaps from some pre-existing medical condition. No witnesses would report hearing a gunshot. No ballistic evidence would survive. The tiny bullet could easily be missed in an autopsy if doctors weren't specifically looking for it, and the weapon itself would be indistinguishable from hundreds of other lipstick tubes in the city. The perfect crime, made possible by the perfect weapon. The price of defection. Nikolai Khokhlov's revelation of Soviet assassination techniques came with a price. The KGB does not forgive traitors, and they do not forget. In September 1957, 3 years after his defection, Khokhlov attended an anti-communist conference in Frankfurt. During the conference, he was served a cup of coffee. It tasted, he later wrote, not as good as usual. Within hours, he felt exhausted. A strange weight oppressed his heart and stomach. He collapsed in a parking lot. Doctors initially struggled to diagnose his condition. Then they realized what had happened. Khokhlov had been poisoned with thallium, a slow-acting metallic poison that causes excruciating pain before killing its victim. The KGB had found him, and they had deployed the very methods he had exposed to the world. Khokhlov spent weeks in the hospital. He was totally bald, his skin disfigured by scars and spots. Those who had known him didn't recognize him. Years later, KGB defectors would reveal that the poison wasn't just thallium. It was radioactive polonium, the same substance that would be used to kill Russian dissident Alexander Litvinenko in London in 2006. But Khokhlov survived, and in his later memoir, he wrote with dark irony about his experience. I, too, was an exhibit of the achievements of Soviet science. Totally bald, so disfigured by scars and spots that those who had known me did not at first recognize me, confined to a rigid diet, I was nevertheless also living proof that Soviet science, the science of killing, is not omnipotent. The assassination attempt on Khokhlov revealed something crucial about the KGB's weapons program. These weren't just tools for use against foreign enemies. They were instruments of retribution against anyone who betrayed the Soviet state. The cigarette cases, the lipstick pistols, the poison-tipped umbrellas, all of them could be turned against former agents who dared to speak the truth. The message was clear: defect, and we will find you. Betray us, and we will use our most sophisticated weapons to silence you. No matter where you hide, no matter how much time passes, we will deliver our own kiss of death. The legacy today. The lipstick pistol discovered in 1965 resides in the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. Visitors can see it on display, a small, innocuous-looking object that once carried the power to kill. The weapon has become iconic, a symbol of Cold War paranoia and ingenuity. It has appeared in films, video games, and countless spy novels. James Bond's Gadget Master Q might have been inspired by fiction, but the real Qs on both sides of the Iron Curtain were building weapons just as fantastical, just as deadly, and far more real. But the lipstick pistol also represents something darker about espionage during that era. It was designed for assassination, pure and simple, not for combat, not for self-defense, but for the targeted killing of individuals deemed enemies of the state. Every element of its design served that single purpose. The Cold War ended decades ago. The Soviet Union collapsed. The KGB was dissolved and reorganized into new agencies. But the philosophy behind the lipstick pistol never really went away. Intelligence services around the world continued to develop concealed weapons, hidden surveillance devices, and tools designed to operate in the shadows. Modern assassination methods are far more sophisticated. Nerve agents that kill with a touch, radioactive poisons that leave victims dying slowly weeks later, drones that strike from altitudes their targets never see. But the fundamental principle remains the same. Make the weapon invisible, get close to the target, strike before they realize the danger. The lipstick pistol was a product of its time, designed for the brutal realities of Cold War espionage. Female agents needed weapons they could carry undetected. Male targets needed to be eliminated quietly, without witnesses, without evidence. And Soviet engineers, working in secret laboratories, created a device that met those requirements with cold efficiency. When the KGB gave that weapon its nickname, the kiss of death, they revealed more than they perhaps intended. A kiss is intimate, personal, a gesture that requires closeness, trust, a moment of vulnerability. And they had weaponized that moment. They had turned intimacy into lethality. One shot, one target, one perfectly disguised weapon that no one would ever suspect until it was too late. That was the promise of the lipstick pistol, a murder weapon that looked like makeup, an assassination tool disguised as a beauty product, a deadly device hidden in the most innocuous object imaginable. And somewhere in the dark archives of intelligence agencies that inherited the KGB's legacy, the designs for that weapon still exist. The engineers who created it may be long dead. The Cold War that spawned it may be over. But the knowledge of how to turn everyday objects into instruments of death survives. Because once you know how to build a lipstick that kills, that knowledge doesn't disappear. It just waits, filed away, ready for the next conflict, the next crisis, the next time someone decides that assassination is the solution to a political problem. The lipstick pistol sits in its museum case now, a relic of a bygone era. Visitors photograph it, read the placard explaining its history, and move on to the next exhibit. But for a brief moment in 1965, when American guards at a West Berlin checkpoint opened what they thought was an innocent tube of cosmetics, the world learned a disturbing truth. In the world of espionage, nothing is ever quite what it seems. And sometimes, the most dangerous weapons are the ones nobody recognizes as weapons at all, until it's too late, until the kiss of death has already been delivered.